We are so glad to have you here tonight. We have a special guest, Dave Upton. He's with Apologetics Response. He's going to explain that. He's a good friend and a good resource in this area. So we're going to turn it over to Dave now. We've got until 7:30, and then we're out of here. Okay, Dave. Take it away.
Okay. Thank you, Roger. Yeah, the name of the ministry is Apologetic Response Ministries. We're a local organization for the Toronto, the GTA area. I was really appreciated, Roger, inviting me to participate in your missions weekend because we do have a challenge on our mission fields with cults. Now, I'm going to be very brief with just two major cults that we all know who come to our doors, Jehovah's Witnesses and Mormons. We're going to look at them. I'm going to give you a brief history of how they started, what they teach, what they believe, and why they're a challenge for our world mission fields, okay? So we're going to start with the Jehovah's Witnesses, who they are. There we are. Jehovah's Witnesses, should I not be concerned? And that was God's response to Jonah, when Jonah was upset about the vine that was giving him shade, and then God made it shrivel up, and Jonah got all upset. Wow, you killed that plant, what for? And he says, you know, I got a whole city here of 120,000 people and cattle and everything, and you're concerned about a plant? Should I not be concerned about these people? And that's who we need to be concerned. We need to be concerned about our missionaries overseas, dealing with these folks. So how did it start? Brief history of the Jehovah's Witnesses. This is Charles Taze Russell right here. And he founded this ministry, or I shouldn't say ministry, he founded this group, this cult, in 1884. Called it Zion's Watchtower, originally. Later Dawn Bible Students. And now it is the Watchtower Bible and Tract Society, and it was founded in 1884 by Charles Taze Russell. Now he wanted to separate his group from Christianity, so what he did was he rejected most of what we would consider tenets of our faith, the essentials of our faith, the deity of Jesus Christ being first and foremost. He denied that. Jesus is Michael the Archangel. That's who they teach. He is. That's who they believe he is. He was God's first created being. Okay, they deny the Trinity, and they deny the existence of hell. So moving on, he died in 1916, and Joseph Rutherford took over. Now Joseph Rutherford was nicknamed Judge because he took some law courses, and so his followers like to look at him as being really smart. So they nicknamed him Judge Rutherford. This picture, is it up there? Yeah. This picture is a mugshot of him. He took over in 1960, or rather, sorry, after Russell died in 1916. This picture is taken 2 years later, in 1918. He was arrested. He and 7 of his followers were arrested for hiding Bibles that were intended to be shipped to our troops overseas because they are pacifists. They don't involve themselves in war or voting or government. They don't salute the flag. Anything to do with governments. All governments they consider are from Satan. Okay? And this gentleman, Rutherford, he also came up with the name Jehovah's Witnesses. So he is really, he just expanded, and his members who were alive to describe how he ran things, they said he ran with iron fist, ran his organization not only as a tough leader, but through fear and intimidation, but through alcohol abuse as well. Other researchers have also found letters written by this man to Adolf Hitler himself. He wrote to Adolf Hitler telling him that he agreed with what he was doing with the Jews. He agreed with his position against the Jews in the hopes that Hitler would not persecute his people. It didn't work. They still got persecuted. But that shows what kind of foundation this group is on. He went further and added more things to separate themselves from the Christian church. He's the one who denied blood transfusions for Christians, for anyone. They called themselves Christians. They took Old Testament scriptures out of context and equated it with blood transfusions and denied. And so thousands of Jehovah's Witnesses over the years have died from refusing blood transfusions. They refuse, they do not celebrate Christmas or birthdays or any other celebration. The only celebration they actually will participate in or allowed to participate in is wedding anniversaries. And you know what? That's never been explained to me. Why? They don't really have any scriptural basis for it. It's kind of arbitrary, as a lot of the things they teach. And finally, he also introduced the torture stake. He claims that Christ was killed on a torture stake as opposed to a cross. So he removed the cross. So even Charles Russell, the founder, on his original magazines that he put out, Zion's Watchtower, had a cross and a crown on it. But Rutherford took that away. So moving on, after him, there was two more presidents that followed after Rutherford, who didn't really change much policy, so I didn't bother putting their names there. But after that, they've adopted a governing body form of administration, and that's what they have today. And a governing body takes up about 12 people. That's very similar to the Mormons, which I'm going to talk about after. The governing body, they're the ones who came up with reinventing the Bible. They came up with their own version of the scriptures. They called it, I forget the name of it, but it's not important. They changed several verses in the Bible to deny the deity of Christ and other things, the existence of hell and other things. So they twisted the scriptures further. Prior to their own Bibles, they would use a King James Bible or American Standard, but again, they only read the Bible with the magazines, so they didn't read the Bible on their own. Now, there are rumors going around. I have to admit they're unsubstantiated, but many people, there's a small group that work in their headquarters in Brooklyn, and there are several ex-members now that are making claims that the governing body has given up control and placed it in the hands of shareholders. Now, the reason that change would come about is in the last decade, they have suffered a lot of lost lawsuits. They've lost a lot of properties they've had to sell. What's happening is people are fighting back. By losing members for unlawful death, people denying blood transfusions, dying too soon. They also have a policy that makes it easily available for pedophiles to take advantage of children, and they protect them. They don't report them. So that's caused them a lot of bad press and lawsuits as well. So the governing body not wanting to take responsibility for it would make sense for them to hand over control to shareholders. I believe that is going to come out in the news later on. So what do they teach? Jesus was created by God, and I think I mentioned that earlier. He's Michael the Archangel as far as they teach. God's first created being, a God, small g. They claim that Jesus returned invisibly in 1914. At one point, they had predicted the end of the world at 1914 was going to happen. But when that didn't happen, they said, oh, that's when Jesus came. That's what we meant to say. Jesus came invisibly, examined all of the Christian organizations in the world to see who was being faithful to him, and he decided that the Watchtower Bible and Tract Society was the only one being faithful to him. And that is a fundamental belief for Jehovah's Witness. If they say they don't believe that Jesus returned invisibly, they will be shunned and kicked out. That is considered a fundamental belief, just like the Trinity is to us. Okay, that's how important that one is to them. They also claim that Jesus was resurrected as a spirit being in the tomb. He didn't rise bodily, as the Scripture teaches us. According to them, he became a gas. He dissolved into gases and just disappeared. And then just reappeared periodically as different people, and that's why the Scriptures didn't, or the apostles or whoever met him didn't recognize him at first, and all this kind of stuff. So they attribute deception to Jesus when he returned. And now he's Michael the Archangel again, because he's up in heaven with Jehovah. So they also teach that salvation comes only by being a faithful witness. And even that, they don't really teach. They say they do, but they don't, because none of them has any assurance of salvation. In fact, I had a Jehovah's Witness in my home tell me that he thought that was one of the most egotistical, arrogant things that anybody could teach anybody, that you're sure of your salvation. Nobody can know the mind of God. How can you be sure? That's crazy. So they can only hope that all of their works and everything they do is good enough to be saved, even in the Watchtower. No salvation or no assurance at all. And the Holy Spirit, here's another one, is not a person. He is an active force, like electricity, that God uses. And all governments belong to Satan, and we looked at that earlier. So what? What difference does this make to us? Well, now there's just over 7 million active Jehovah's Witnesses. Now what that means is that 7 million witnesses that are baptized. So those are the numbers that they publish. This is how many are baptized. So it doesn't sound like that many, but there's actually 17 million which would consider themselves Jehovah's Witnesses even though they're not baptized. So they believe it. Now, they make up over 115,000 congregations, but what numbers are not existent here and are almost impossible to calculate is how many people they turn away from the church by just teaching their teachings door to door, by giving out magazines and getting people to deny the Trinity, getting people to deny the deity of Christ. Well, okay, I'm not going to join the Jehovah's Witness, but they're right about the Trinity. That's crazy stuff. Those numbers are incalculable. We have no idea how many people they're turning away from the church just from that. Another number that's incalculable is, I have a sister that's a Jehovah's Witness. One sister, that's one person. Okay, but guess what? Now, she's not the only victim of the Watchtower. All of her family members, myself, my parents, my brother, aunts, uncles, we're all affected. We're all victimized now because we can't have a relationship with her anymore. So how many, now let's multiply that, 7 million. Take that number and multiply it by how many family members. That's a lot of victims, folks. That's a lot. So it's not as small as it seems. And there's been a 3% increase in membership every year since September 11th. So they're using fear. All of this terrorism stuff that's going on around us, even just recently in Boston, they'll use it. They'll use that to their advantage. And they'll use fear and say, we have protection for you. You can be safe in Jehovah's house. And this number here, again, it's astronomical. It's over 6 billion magazines have been published, and that's just by April 1st, and that's what I found. And that number just keeps growing and growing and growing. They publish magazines and books in over 150 different languages all around the world, and that's where they're a threat to our missions. Not all of our missionaries are equipped with multi-language materials. Even, Wycliffe is doing what they can. Other translating companies are doing what they can, or organizations are doing what they can. But that's a big machine. That's a big translation machine. They actually came up with a translation computer software that IBM purchased from them to translate all of these documents into all of these different languages. Okay, so let's move on to Mormonism. What difference does it make? And the reason I ask that is because a lot of people think Mormons are great people, and I'm one of them. I think Mormons are great people. They're wonderful people. They're very nice, and if you know any, hey, they're the best friends you could have. So what difference does it make? They believe in Jesus, don't they? Well, let's find out. Let's start with a brief history. 1820, Joseph Smith. This is when the Mormons started. Again, in the 1800s, same as the Jehovah's Witness. He had a vision. While praying, he was told that all churches were wrong and that it was up to him to restore the church. In 1823, his next vision came in the form of visits from the angel Moroni, who told him to dig up some golden plates built in the Hill Cumorah. That's in upstate New York. So this is even before Utah. In 1827, he received the plates and began to translate what he called Reformed hieroglyphics into what today is known as the Book of Mormon. Reformed hieroglyphics don't exist. Okay, here's a picture that sort of depicts what he claims he saw. In 1829, the finished translation was authenticated and verified by his witnesses, his buddies, who said, yeah, it's all true. And they have a series of books on the history of the church making that claim. So in 1830, the Book of Mormon is now printed and bound in English, and the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, that's their official name, is founded in 1830. They'll use the King James Bible in as so far as it's translated correctly. They'll say what that means is when you come up with something that of their beliefs that disagree with the King James Bible, they'll just claim that, well, that's not translated correctly. Their other, what they consider scriptures are the Book of Mormon. They came up with a couple other books called Doctrine and Covenants and Pearl of Great Price. And this is what the missionaries will have in their hands when they come to your door. So what do they teach? There's more than one God. They're pluralistic. We have a God. Our God is Elohim. He lives on a planet called Kolob. It's very science fiction. Jesus and, I'm getting ahead of myself here. Jesus Christ is the spirit brother of Lucifer. So there's an 8-minute animation video that I wish I could show you, but I don't have the time. But I can briefly tell you, it's a progressive religion. Everything is progressive revelation. We are progressive, so it fits right into the evolution theory. As we follow Mormonism, we can progress to become a god. So our God is Elohim. He was once a man. And he followed the precepts and teachings of Mormonism, became perfect, and that's how he earned him being godhood. He had multiple wives on his planet, so he had billions of spirit children, and that's who we are. We were sent to earth to be born as human beings, and now we have to accept Mormonism and grow and become gods ourselves and rule over our own planets. So Jesus and Lucifer were the firstborn of his family, and Jesus won out in an argument to be the savior of our planet. Lucifer was punished, so then it gets all racist and crazy, and I don't have time to get into that. But so let's, sorry, I went on a tangent on that one. Jesus Christ was born after sexual intercourse between God the Father and Mary. Thereby, they deny the virgin birth. Okay, so as far as they're concerned, Jesus was born through natural means. God the Father has a body of flesh and bones. That never changed because he was a man like us at one time, and he became a god. God the Father was once a man, and that's what I've kind of been talking about. We can become gods and rule over our own planets, and I got ahead of myself and told you that already. What's interesting about all these teachings is, you know, I have a lot of references there underneath, and we don't have time to look at them, but they're in your handouts, and I hope you'll look at that. Is a lot of the stuff that they teach is actually denied or contradicted in the Book of Mormon, which is really interesting, and they don't seem to realize that until you point it out to them. So what? Why are they a problem? Again, looking at them like we do with the Jehovah's Witness, there's just over 14 million Mormons throughout the world, and again, these numbers represent baptized Mormons. So there's a lot more that are not. Last year, Mormons saw over 280,000 converts. On the poster over here, I have statistics from 2006, and then in red marker I've shown where they've grown since then, and they're continuing to grow. So they're a problem. Whoops, I went backwards. So, what does this mean to our missions? Ruth Tucker, she wrote this book, Another Gospel. Now this quote isn't from that book, it's from another book that she wrote on missions. She's a missiologist. Somebody else can tell me how to pronounce that word correctly later. I've come to the conclusion that one of the most serious and least recognized problems we face in overseas missions is that of the proliferation of cults. Another missiologist, Dr. David Hasselgrove, as we enter a new century and new millennium, it is becoming increasingly apparent that we must also focus on millions who are being caught up in new religious movements emanating from both the East and the West. They constitute not only a new mission field, but also one of the most aggressive competitors for the allegiance of multiplied millions who are turning away from the faith of their fathers. One more. Lawrence Wright, a Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist for The New Yorker. The number of Mormons throughout the world may soon equal that of the Jews. However, the Mormons are a missionary people, and the majority of them are first-generation converts. Worldwide, according to the church, the numbers of members have grown by nearly 400% during the past 30 years. A recent Pew Forum on Religion study found that 13% of converts to Mormonism and 33% of converts to Jehovah's Witnesses came from Protestant Christian churches. That means that in just the last 2 years, 71,500 Mormon converts and 184,000 Jehovah's Witness converts came from Christian denominations. Both of these groups target Christians, folks, and most of our missions in overseas plant churches in third world countries, and the cults are right behind us, and they're there to pick from our fields. My good friend Paul Carden here, he's Executive Director of the Centers for Apologetics Research. He was a missionary himself in 4 different countries. He says, understand that about 90% or more of pastors in the developing world have no formal training. They're not prepared to meet this challenge. Pastors in Africa were found with a Bible on their pulpit and a Watchtower magazine right next to it. And these were pastors that were converted by Protestant Christian missionaries, but then left to get picked on by the Jehovah's Witness. Now, my own website and email address. Here's from India. I've been studying with Jehovah's Witnesses for some time. Their version of the Bible disturbs me a lot. I was originally of the Hindu faith, and I wanted to know about Christianity proper. Christianity, please help. That's from a reader in India. Another one from India. Respected sir, my name is Monika Satish from India. I need your support to fight against Antichrist. Nowadays there are so many Antichrists raised from India, especially Zakir Naik, founder of the president of the Islamic Research Foundation. I'm requesting you with a kind heart, please do a debate with him, with hope. This one from a brother in the Philippines. Brother David, thanks for the good work. Could you please put me on your mailouts that you are sending to others? It would be most helpful for me in my teaching here in the Philippines. We have very little access to such good information. And over here, it is like the hurrier I go, the behinder I get. Thank you so much. May God bless you richly in your work. This is a gentleman I met here in Ontario. He was a high-ranking Mormon in the Philippines for 23 years. When he came to Canada, he was thinking about leaving, but he wasn't sure. He was looking for some help, so I met with him. I want to say thank you for your time and sharing to us your experience and some gospel principles. The DVDs that you provided are all worthy for me to discover more hidden truths about Mormonism. Thank you for giving your honest observations about the Mormon Church. He's now rejected the Mormon Church, and he's attending an evangelical Christian church. I hear from readers in Africa. For some time now, I've been praying that God would lead me through the Holy Spirit to Christian websites that promote the gospel in its fullness, not adding or subtracting. Thank God I was able to locate your homepage, and I saw exactly what I'm looking for. I'll be very glad to hearing from you. God bless, and remain yours for greater revival. And that's from the Ivory Coast in West Africa. One more. Dear Pastor, I am pastoring some churches in Kenya. I have visited your website and am encouraged by your messages. I write to seek for fellowship, inviting you to visit us and minister and share the gospel with us. God bless you, and hoping to hear from you soon. And that's from Kenya. Now, unfortunately, I have to turn these gentlemen down. I'm not a missionary. I am a home mission person and teaching Christians here. But I have friends, and Paul Cardin is one of them, and he directs the Centers for Apologetics Research, and they have mission centers in Russia, the Ukraine, Hungary, Brazil, Latin America, and Africa, with partner ministries in the Philippines and Romania. Their website is in the handouts I gave you, so please visit them, use them, support them. Another one in the handout, I've given you these two tracts, is Mormonism Christian and Four Dangers of Jehovah's Witnesses. The Institute for Religious Research is based in Michigan. They publish these in over 20 different languages. You can look up their website. Some of them are downloadable. If you know anybody that doesn't speak English, or you have missionaries in other countries, send them these materials. They really need them. Finally, there's my website. We offer seminars, questions. Write down, actually, you have my email address there. You can email me with your questions. I'd be glad to put you on the mailing list. I forgot to bring a sign-up sheet, but you can just send me an email and say, hey, put me on your email list. I have a YouTube channel that can give you more information as well. Just before I close, we're almost out of time, I'll tell you briefly what's in here, in the package that I gave you. This is a DVD, folks. There's a video on here about the Watchtower and Jehovah's Witnesses that will give you more information than I was able to give you today. There is a seminar on here that I gave on Mormonism, which will also give you more information than I was able to give you today. And so just use that. The notes that I had on my PowerPoint are included in here. A couple of tracks. I wanted to highlight this one. This one you can actually rip in half. It's the same on both sides. It's called Looking at 6 Teachings of the Watchtower. And this has been effective in actually getting Jehovah's Witnesses to look at their own Bible, their own scripture, and seeing how it contradicts their own teachings. And they do leave the Watchtower just from this one little piece of paper. I'm out of time, so thank you for having me. I think we've got maybe a few minutes for, do we have time for question and answer? And 2 questions. We got time for 2 questions. Okay. Yes, sir.
What's one or two things we can say at the doorway when they come to our door?
So, I'm sorry.
What's one or two things that we can say as a response when they come to our door?
Okay. That's a very good question. The question is, what are 1 or 2 things we can say when they come to our door? And I'm glad you asked that question, because I think as Christians we all have a responsibility to answer the door, not close the blinds and turn the TV off and pretend we're not home. That's easy to do, and I'm guilty of it. I've done it. I'll admit it. And I'm ashamed of it, and I won't do it again. So yes, we are responsible. Here's what we do. We're polite. They'll never remember anything you tell them, but they'll remember how you treat them. So always be polite, regardless of anything. You don't need to accept their literature. You can politely refuse it. In fact, I recommend that you do. Unless you know a lot about them and you want to spend more time with them. As soon as you accept literature, that's an invitation for them to come back. Okay? So you can politely refuse, and that's what I would recommend. But definitely, for sure, listen to them, whatever presentation they have to give you. And you don't have to agree with anything they say. You can just nod and say thank you for sharing that with me. I have something to share with you too. If you got a couple minutes, I'd like to share with you how I came to Christ, and give them your personal testimony, okay? Because that's something they have no scriptural defense for. They have no twisted scriptures to contradict anything you say. And when they see that in your face, this relationship that they have, they don't have that, and they're impressed by it. That speaks to them because they don't have that and they want that. Okay, so that's a very important question. Thank you. And I saw a hand up right in the front row here.
Yes, you mentioned about pedophilia being kind of covered up by the Jehovah's Witnesses.
Yes.
Now, is that responsible by the organization themselves? Like, are they involved in that, or are they just taking over? And if so, what's kind of their justification for that?
Okay, their justification for it is, I can't come up with the scriptures off the top of my head, but you'll recognize it, that when you have a charge against a brother, you should have 1 or 2 witnesses, or 2 or 3 witnesses, to charge the brother with a sin. So they'll use that. And so in a case of, let's say, a child goes to their parent and says, Elder so-and-so abused me. Parent goes to Elder so-and-so and says, my kid abused you, or my kid says you abused him, and says it to the other elders too. Well, then they just ask the elder, did you do it or not? And he'll say, no. Okay, case closed. And that's it, because were there any witnesses? No. And they'll cover it up. You can write this down, please. I didn't give you this website. SilentLambs.org. It's an entire website dedicated to exposing this particular issue. Silent Lambs, one word, SilentLambs.org. Okay? I'm sorry, I should have put it in the handouts. But that's an entire website dedicated, and it's run by former witnesses who have worked in the Watchtower headquarters and saw all of these files, thousands of files of cases of child abuse that were not given to authorities outside of the Watchtower. And so now that